Hi, I'm Elliot Einhorn, and you're listening to the Talkhouse Music Podcast. Lauren Mayberry of Chvrches and Ben Gibbard of Death Cab for Cutie have a mutual appreciation society. But before this talk, the two had never spoken. We recorded this episode just before their bands joined up for a co-headlining tour. Ben has led Seattle's Death Cab since 1997. Over the course of 8 albums, they've become indie standard bearers, helping to define the sound of American alternative rock. Ben also found massive success with the electronic pop project The Postal Service, who released one influential album, 2003's Give Up. Death Cab's most recent release is the 2015 LP Kintsugi. Lauren Mayberry is a frontwoman for the Glasgow band Chvrches, who have released 2 albums of immensely catchy synthpop, 2013's The Bones of What You Believe, and last year's Every Open Eye. She also founded the Glasgow women's collective TYCI, and runs the label Goodbye Records alongside the other members of Chvrches. Lauren has contributed to the Talkhouse multiple times, writing about Karen O, Dum Dum Girls, Wolf Alice, and more. Her chat with Haim on a Talkhouse Music Podcast recorded at last year's Pitchfork Music Festival is a must-hear. During the recording of this talk, Lauren was, to use her words, at a truck stop outside of Jumbo Jimmy's Crab Shack somewhere in Maryland. This seems appropriate, as a lot of this chat is about life on the road. Ben was at his writing space in Seattle, and as they were both on cell phones in noisy places, the sound quality is a bit rough. Still, the two jumped right into a freewheeling conversation that, at its core, is about change. Changes in their relationships to the touring lifestyle, in writing lyrics, in watching other bands play, and the places that they call home. This talk also takes in the Glasgow and Seattle music scenes, fear that the ability to write songs will one day disappear, and much more. Check it out.
We haven't met in person yet.
No.
Yeah.
I guess other than our kind of failed email attempt, we haven't met in real life.
You are on a road trip from where to where are you going right now?
At the moment, I'm in a parking lot outside Jumbo Jimmy's Crab Shack, which I believe is somewhere in Maryland. And I just moved to New York at the end of last year, so we thought we would take a little road trip up to DC with some friends, and I'm experiencing the proper, authentic American road trip, I think.
Yeah, and you're obviously, you're enjoying all the delicacies that our interstate system has to offer.
Yes, I tried my first bit of jerky today. I don't know if I'm convinced by it as a concept, but maybe everybody else seemed into it, and they're all American, so maybe it's because I'm foreign, I don't get it in the same way. I'm not sure, but you'd think I'd be tired of driving around rural America at this point, but I guess it's different when you're not on tour and you're in a car and it's social, not for gigs.
Yeah, I feel also that, I feel like the open road is so instilled in us as touring musicians that, an idea of a good time is like, hey, why don't we spend the next 2 days driving a lot and stopping at truck stops and looking at weird shit that we think might be interesting. I'm just now, after almost 18 years of touring, finally getting to that point in my life where I'm like, you know what? Staying home is kind of great. Seattle is kind of great. I kind of like being at home a lot more than I used to. I feel like my restless energy is my wanderlust is starting to subside a bit. And I mean, do you like being on the road? Is it something you look forward to, or are you somebody who would prefer to be at home with your person and be working on music and whatever else?
I think for all three of us, it kind of flipped at some point. At first, when we were touring so much, it did go from 0 to 100 because we were just in bands that would play in clubs in our hometown, and nobody would really necessarily come to those shows, and there wasn't a lot of hardcore long-term touring involved. And then I guess when Chvrches started to get more known, we had to tour all the time, and it was quite intense and hard to kind of grasp at first. Whereas now I feel like we spent so much time on the road. When we go home, I feel like there's a certain couple of days adjustment period where I feel like I should be doing something right now, but I don't know what it is, but something. And yeah, it's kind of weird when you realize that the unorthodox way of living has kind of become really normal, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. My fiance toured with doing production and tour management and stuff with bands for a number of years, and we talk about that 2-week period post a long tour where, you know, you're just going to be crazy for a couple weeks, you know, because at 9 p.m. I'm like, why aren't there a couple thousand people in our living room? You know, I'm supposed to, you know, my physiology is telling me that I should be up and performing at that time, and there's a weird kind of like post-tour depression always kicks in. But I'm glad that that we both, my fiance and I both, like, we know that's happening, and we're just like, yeah, you're just tour crazy right now. You've just been on the road forever, and you're not acting like a normal human being right now. So we have like a grace period of about 2 weeks before we have to address it as like, no, actually, you're kind of, you know, you're this is a problem, you know. But at this point, I feel like we recognize it and we were able to balance it out. I don't know, and I mean, it seems like, I mean, you said it, like, it seems like you guys, you know, I know you guys were all in other bands, and I actually saw your bandmates' band Aerogram. Like, I was a fan of those guys. I saw them with like Mogwai and Superchunk. Yeah, I saw them with like Mogwai and Superchunk in like 1999 in Portland.
Yeah.
And they're fucking great. Like, it was a great show just across the board. Like, seeing those guys in Mogwai and Superchunk, like, all, certainly with Mogwai and Superchunk too. I was new to Aerogram, but Mogwai and Superchunk were two of my favorite groups and still are. And I was given this impression, I've always been given this impression about, especially Glasgow, that like, that it's a fairly insular scene. It seems to be like it seems to be very unique in the UK, in that bands seem to be friends, which is not something I ever get from bands in London or really anywhere else. Is that true, or is that just my like perception of things there?
Yeah, I think it's true. Definitely true to a certain extent, that everybody, it's such a small town and there's only so many music bars you can play in, that people do all know each other to an extent. And I didn't know Ian and Martin personally before we started the band, but I knew all about all the bands they'd been in, and I knew them to like nod at in a pub. But yeah, I guess it's, for such a small place, there's been so many amazing bands that have come out of there, and I feel like if we had grown up somewhere where maybe you didn't need to work as hard for it or something, maybe we'd be a different kind of musicians. I'm not sure. I feel like the underdog factor has definitely informed how we operate to an extent.
Yeah, it's always seemed like the city in the UK to me that is the most like an American indie rock scene. It was familiar to me. It felt like a similar sense of community that I really loved, you know, about being a band in the States. And we never get that in the UK anywhere else, which I always thought was really interesting.
Well, yeah, I guess, I don't know, I suppose for us, we spend so long trying to, like, when you're growing up and being in a band, you're like, we got to play a show in London, we got to try and play, you know, got to get to London to do it. But then I always found, until this band, when you're playing half-empty shows in London on like a 4 or 5 band bill where nobody really gives a shit, I was like, this is really depressing. Why is this what we're striving for? And it's not really making any difference. And I don't know, people ask us that a lot when we were starting this band and talking about the first record. They were asking whether we would move the band to London and work there. But I think, I don't know, there didn't seem like there was a need at this point, or maybe just, I don't know, the internet and how people share music and stuff. It didn't really seem like we needed to physically move to another place to help people find out about the band anymore.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I feel, you know, being from Seattle, you know, that was something we felt from the very beginning too. Is people in the Northwest up here have a real strong sense of kind of localism and a particular pride and kind of in both a good and a bad way, kind of a slight xenophobia, like a musical xenophobia. And you know, when people would when any time a band would leave Seattle to like move to LA, or I guess now people move to Brooklyn, you know, they move to Brooklyn or LA. It was always just kind of like a, you know, that there was a particular type of careerism in that was kind of laughable, you know. I mean, I always appreciated about music here in the Northwest is that people always seem to be doing it for the right reasons. At least the bands that got successful seem to be doing it for the right reasons. Like, there was never a sense of, there was never like I guess I should say when we started, we never had any sense that this would be something we could do for a living. It always felt like something that would exist for a short period of time, and then we'd have to go back to grad school or something. We'd have to go do something else with our lives. And in a way, I'm still kind of waiting for that other shoe to fall. Like, it's been almost 20 years, and I'm still planning for that. Like, well, I'm gonna have to go back and get my master's degree at some point, and I'm fairly certain that's not going to happen at this point, but there's just this voice in the back of my head that says, like, eventually you're going to have to get a real job. You'll have to go back to the real world. And I suppose maybe it's because we never started out kind of thinking that was going to be possible,
Plus, I guess if you ever lost that sense of, I don't know, like, humility or gratitude for what you have, then I suppose it would definitely change you as a writer. And I always think once people lose their sense of reality or the grasp on the fact that what they're doing is kind of a crazy reality, I think that's sometimes when people start writing very differently. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, I think that real human interaction is incredibly important as a writer, especially in the styles that I think both of us kind of write in. It's like, when you're trying to kind of you're trying to get to the truth of a matter, or try to unpack something that's emotionally complicated. If you surround yourself with people who only say yes to you and only, that don't push back on you at all, I lived in LA for 3 years. I was married and living in LA, and that was something that I saw that a lot in people that I interacted with, this sense of, when people would become successful, they would surround themselves with people who would not tell them no. And, to me, that I kind of was making a mental note along the way of like, okay, that's something that I can't do that. I can't allow myself to just, surround myself with people who are either literally paid to be there, be it, crew people and assistants and, or just kind of sycophantic kind of quote unquote friends who are there just to kind of feed your ego and tell you what you want to hear. And I found in my life since I've been back in Seattle for the last 5 years, that the people who, I surround myself with here most of them are not even musicians, or if they are musicians, they're people I've known for almost 20 years and can tell you like, yeah, that song kind of sucks, man. Like you can do better than that. Or like, yeah, I don't know, man. I think your last record was kind of da-da-da-da. You should probably hit this a little harder, or like work on this. And I was like, okay, yeah, I'll take that from you. Like I can take that kind of, constructive criticism or all out harshness from people who I've known for a long time and I trust with that kind of, bluntness,
Yeah. And I think, I don't know, the idea, I think about it a lot, I suppose, because we're kind of coming towards the end of this album campaign and thinking about where we're going to make the next record and how we're going to do it. And I have like a probably daily panic where I'm like, what if I have nothing to write about? What if I have nothing to talk about? Because I've just been in a tour bus or in a van for 2 years. But I don't know, I guess I'll just have to wait and see what happens. But I don't really know if you felt like the way that you write lyrics or the stuff you're writing about has changed substantially over the course of Death Cab.
I think it has, in a sense that, when I look, we play old songs like the first 3 records. I think I wrote a lot more cryptically back then. In my mind, though, I didn't think I was writing more. I wasn't writing cryptically or kind of, trying to kind of hide things in the songs. But as I look back on some of those songs and read the lyrics through, I'm kind of like, oh yeah, I know what I was trying to say here. I was trying to say something clearly. And the way I was writing at that point made it come out more cryptic than I think I would have written it now. For better or for worse, I know, we've made 8 albums and I've heard every variation of you haven't made a good record since ... It always tends to be the record. It always tends to be the record 2 records back from the record that we're currently promoting, because that's, but I've heard, but I think a lot of people at least some people who were into the band in the early days, I think like that kind of cryptic, more maybe poetic kind of style. And I definitely feel like I've moved towards a more literal, descriptive style of writing. Just because I think when you listen to more music and you kind of start finding things in songwriters that you never really paid much attention to, that you admire, you try your hand at different styles of writing. And for me, I mean, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I started listening to a lot of Randy Newman and was just like, wow, he says so much in so few words. He says so much. And, you know, I think I've been able to use that with mixed results. There's certain songs that in the last couple of records, are like, I think I could have probably done that one a little better. But I do feel like it does change. I feel like what I'm trying to kind of accomplish is never changes, which is, you know, I want people to hear a song and then see a film in their mind. You know, that I want the lyrics to be immediately evocative and visual. And, you know, that obviously can be done with a more cryptic, poetic style, or it can be done with a very literal style. And, I feel there's value in both, but it is interesting when I go back on stuff I've written when I was 20, 21. And at the time I thought, like, man, I'm really, really killing it right here, you know? And I'll go back and be like, really? I thought that was a good lyric. I thought that worked, you know? I know, but I definitely feel like I'm kind of in the same boat as you are, in the sense that I've been on the road for probably about the same amount of time, because I think our records came out roughly around the same time. And, you know, it's like, I just need to get away from all this and live real life, you know? And I know that once we get done with all this touring, I'll start writing again at a level that I'm happy with. But I do have those fears, like, you know, what if I never write another song, you know? What if this is it? You know, what if I have nothing to write about? But I feel very confident. You are such a great writer. I'm very confident that you will, once you get off this crazy train, you will immediately start writing killer songs. Like, if you haven't been doing so the whole time already, you know?
Well, I try and keep a notebook on tour, and I write down, like, words or phrases or just things I've thought about as we're thinking of them. But then I started to look back through that notebook the other day, and I thought, this looks like the diary of a crazy person. It's just such a random set of things. And like 1 minute it looks like it's somebody trying to write poetry, and then it's like amusing about something that you saw on the news. And I'm like, I'm going to really need to work to figure out what the fuck is in this at the end of it. But I don't know. I think sometimes when we're on tour, I don't write anything at all, because I suppose we're just in such a different headspace. But then I think once the promo stuff lightens up a little and you can kind of start thinking about writing. And I also think it's nice when you hear a record or you get to actually go see a band play a show for once, and it gets you excited about writing and excited about playing shows in a way that sometimes maybe you forget when you're just in the day-to-day of it. I don't know.
Oh, I feel the exact same way. I mean, I don't write anything when we're on tour. I mean, I don't. I might kind of make a little note in my phone, like if I think of something that I find clever at the time, I'd make a little note. But yeah, I find that when we're touring and promoting a record, I mean, that's between a show and sound check and press and stuff like that. That's like 4 or 5 hours of music, you know, in the day already. And you know, I don't know if I don't think I felt that much. I guess I listened to more music when we were just touring in a van or traveling around when I was younger. But I find now I'm almost 40 that I only have room in my day for so many hours of music. And, you know, and so I don't tend to listen to a lot of music on tour. I don't write anything really. You know, the idea of like spending free time listening to an album, if I'm not at home listening to it, is just, I just can't bring myself to do it. I get so burned out on music, you know, when we're on the road as much as we do, that I start asking myself the question, like, God, do I like music anymore? Is music something that I enjoy? And, you know, the answer is, of course I do. I just need to get away from it as, you know, from it filling my day with it, you know, and, you know, our own shows, and then you have those moments where you hear an album or you go see a show for fun, and you're like, oh my God, that was so great, and you get that feeling that you got when you were, a kid, and it happens for me. It happens less frequently, being as I get older, just because I've heard a lot of music, but it happens it happens all the time, and you're just like, when it does happen, it just blows your mind. Like I went and saw my friend Kate LeBon play last week here in Seattle. And it was one of those shows that was just like, oh my God, she's so fucking great. And that her band was so great. And like, there's one of those moments where like, man, I just want to go home and write songs now. Like I was just so inspired watching her play. And she's, I don't know if you're a fan of hers or not, but she's so great.
Yeah. And it's nice when you can go to a show and have that relationship with music still. Like I feel a lot of the time when I go to shows, like I've overthought every aspect of a live music show at this point, so I feel like I'm such a naysayer. Like if I'm watching something, I'm like, this sounds really shitty, or the bass is really muddy, and I wonder how how many people have come to this show, and then I start doing like tour budget maths. I'm like, they really can't afford to be touring with that lighting rig. I don't know how they're doing that, and I'm like, I'm not listening to anything. What's wrong with me? But then sometimes when you go see something, maybe if you're in the right mindset, or if the show is that fucking good, then I don't think about any of those things. And it's actually really nice to go back to enjoying music in that way for once and not be thinking about all the superfluous stuff.
Yeah, totally. And I'm sure there's people who would listen to this and hear us talking about this and be like, oh, boo-hoo, you guys like,
whiny assholes. It's
hard to listen to music. But, oh, yeah, exactly. But I mean, I feel so fortunate that I can do this for a living. Like there are, of course, moments that I might take it for granted, but 99.9% of the time, I feel so fortunate that this is my life. But that also comes with its own set of kind of this crazy life this is also my job, and there are times when it's just work. There's times where it's not this music and playing shows and not this transcendent, spiritual experience, and sometimes you have to grind through them when it's like your 5th show of the week and you're sick, and you're in some weird town and you just want to be in your own bed. I never would expect the audience or anybody listening to this to have any sympathy for that. But that is the reality of our lives. And, it comes with its own, pluses and minuses, I suppose. But I do the same thing. I'll be like, man, how are these guys able? These guys must be spending the entire budget of this show on lights. This is crazy. Like, I still feel like we are such a from the days we toured in the van and we were we were broke. I mean, that has not left me. So when we're trying to do our own shows, like, we got to make sure that we can, we're not spending all of our money trying to make the light look cool,
Yeah. Well, I think for me, from what I can gather about you guys, that's always been a really important part of it. And what I, as an outsider, have always really enjoyed. It felt like even though the band was getting bigger, there was still like an ethos that you guys were kind of trying to hold on to. And I think that's something that I always really respected. And I remember being at college and people talking about like, oh, you were going to do records on a major. And, But then I kind of always felt like you were holding on to the ideas and the integrity that made the band what it was. So hopefully that's what you were intending, because that's what I read into it. So.
Well, that's I really appreciate you saying that, because that was certainly what we were going for. But at the same time, looking back on that period where we transitioned from an indie to a major, we tried to play it off like we were like, it's not a big deal. We're the same band, We're just on a major now, and like we're not going to be one of those bands that freaks out about being on a major label. But in actuality, I mean, it was a much more difficult transition than we anticipated. Just in the sense that in some ways, I tend to not pay as much attention to what the press or people say about our band now as I did back then. But there was this sense of like, well, people are really focusing on like, the label on the back of the record as the most, important thing. I have an office in downtown. I'm currently at my office in downtown Seattle, where I constructed like a small writing studio. So I literally like go to work every day when I'm at home. Like I go from my place on Capitol Hill, and I go downtown, and I'm in an office right now. Like there's like a lawyer next door, like, and years ago I read about how Nick Cave would go from, he had an office, he would go and write songs. That's what he did to write. And I was like, that sounds really good to me, because I've never been able to be successful writing songs at home. Like I just can't, if I had a music room in my house, I just would always be thinking about it, or there'd be distractions, there'd be, somebody coming over to do something, or somebody stopping by. And I found it's been really beneficial to me to have a place to go to write music that I can, when I leave my office, I'm leaving the song I was working at the office. Like I don't like take it home with me and then try to wake up in the middle of the night and think about how I could fix it. Like I literally just like, all right, I wrote half this thing, put it away, come back tomorrow, crack it open, see if it is still working. They just have like a small amp and a piano, and but it is weird to be in an office. Like this is, I said, I treat it like my job. Like I'm literally treating it like my job right now. Like I'm like, I got to get to work by 10, even though there's nobody telling me I need to be here,
Well, but sometimes like having that self-motivation and also that kind of separation, I think, is really important. I've lost count of the times I've tried to write stuff in the kitchen in my apartment, and I can't do it. I just end up just fidgeting and doing other things that don't need to be done. And I think a lot of the stuff I wrote for the record we just put out was written in cafes or on trains and things like that. Maybe when I can't be distracted or something, it's probably good for me to have that. But yeah, I don't know. I guess whatever works after a point. And I feel like even when we're in the studio, if I'm sitting there and Ian and Martin are there as well, I can't sit on the couch and write lyrics like that. I just can't do it. And it makes me seem really cagey, but I have to go somewhere else. I can't sit and listen to you talk about the gate on the snare drum while this is happening. I can't do both at once.
Yeah, and I can't even have anybody in the house when I'm writing stuff. Like when my fiance would be like, oh, I'm gonna, like, I couldn't like be in our like side room with a guitar writing a song while she's, reading in the other room. Like I feel that writing music is a very solitary experience for me. And, the idea of being in a room with, at least with people that I'm supposed to be paying attention to, trying to write lyrics would be just very difficult or impossible, Yeah. I mean, well, I guess I'm curious how you're finding New York. How, you said you moved to New York in December, I believe.
Yeah, I moved at the end of the year. I guess at the moment we're on the road so much, it's kind of living anywhere is kind of a vague concept, but I don't know. I guess I've been in Glasgow for 10 years almost, and it just seemed like they've given us visas. They were crazy enough to give us long-term US visas, so I figured I should use it. And I don't know, I guess I always liked it as a place, and I feel like there's something about trying to assimilate, which I feel like is going to be a good thing for me as a person, because I'm probably quite a wet blanket a lot of the time. But yeah, I'm enjoying it. I feel some days I like it a lot more than other days. But I don't know. I think it's such a diverse place. There's so much. I feel like I'm seeing shows or bits of theater or going to just something creative all the time. And I think I'm kind of a leech in that regard. Like when I want to feel creative, I feel like I want to watch movies or TV or read books and things like that, and then maybe that'll spark ideas. So really, it's a selfish pursuit. It's hoping that it'll shore me up with stuff to write about.
Well, I'm sure it will. I mean, there's, I've never lived in New York. I feel like outside of the fact that I'm pretty much, I've doubled down on the Northwest. But I was talking to a friend recently about New York who had just moved there, and I realized, like, I think that my moving to New York window closed when I was about 27. I think I kind of I realized that I don't think, especially for what I want out of a city and what I want out of my life. I mean, I spend a lot of time in the mountains and out in the wilderness. It's kind of like where I would prefer to be. If I have like a free day. That's like, the vastness of New York is so inspiring, and there's so many creative, interesting things going on. But I just feel like one of the wonderful things I love about living in Seattle is I can be in the mountains in a half hour, and I find like that, the same things about New York that once were really, I found really inspiring. They kind of work against me at this point. Like but I do enjoy it there so much. And, there's every time I'm there's that moment of like, man, I really did fuck up by not like living in New York for a year or something like that when I was young enough to really appreciate it.
I can't really talk because right now I'm in a car park in rural Maryland, so and maybe that is true. I'm being a hypocrite. But I don't know. I feel I'm excited. My friends have, from what I can tell from our communicating with our hands, have got me some takeaway shrimp to eat in the car, so I'm quite excited about that.
Oh, great! There you go.
Yeah.
That's going to smell lovely, and that's going to smell lovely for the rest of your drive. Having a tub of takeaway shrimp in the car. That's going to be. I
think that's going to go well. But I took it as I was like, they understand me. They know what I wanted, even though I wasn't inside the restaurant with them. They know.
Yeah, exactly. That's awesome. Well, I'm really excited about these shows I'm really excited about these shows that we're going to do with you guys. I mean, we all really enjoy your guys' records, and when I first heard your band, it kind of like there's like an emotional lift, like and like goosebump kind of factor that your band has for me, where I just want to when I'm listening to you guys and walking down the street, I walk faster with my head up higher, and there's such a really beautiful emotional lift to kind of the music that you guys make, and I'm just like selfishly excited to just get a chance to see you guys multiple times on this run, and I'm really excited about that.
Well, thank you very much for having us. We're super psyched as well, and I guess at first I was like, is that a crazy build to put together? But now I feel like it makes sense in a crazy way. So thank you so much for having us.
Oh my God, it's gonna be great. We're gonna have a great time.
Well, I might go eat shrimp in a sweaty car.
Yeah, go eat some shrimp. I'll see you in a couple of weeks. Have a safe road trip home, and I will. We will meet in person very soon.
All right, cool. Well, thank you for having us, Talkhouse, and I'll see you guys all soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi, I'm Elia Einhorn, and you've been listening to Lauren Mayberry and Ben Gibbard in conversation on the Talkhouse Music Podcast. Check out Lauren's talk with the Haim sisters, as well as members of Chvrches and Death Cab for Cutie writing about music on thetalkhouse.com.